The Mount Nebel wrong warp in Final Fantasy VII. You might have seen it in speedruns. You might have seen some of the weird things you can do with it. You might even know that it's the only way to get into the debug room without the use of cheats or save editors. But what is it? How does it work? First of all, you should know that this glitch is only possible to do on the PC version of Final Fantasy VII, which includes the Steam version. The reason for this is because the way the PC version handles memory is different from console versions, allowing for glitches that aren't otherwise possible. That being said, let's talk about how to actually perform the glitch. The easiest way to set it up is to die during the Nibelheim flashback, which requires getting into Mount Nebel without Sephiroth in your party, since Sephiroth is programmed to never take damage. There are a couple of ways to do this. You can either use the overlapping text box glitch to skip taking a photo with Sephiroth, or clip past these guys just before going into the mansion. I'll link some tutorials in the description if you want to know more about these tricks. But either way, just run into Mount Nebel and find an encounter on this first screen. Since Young Cloud is so weak, it shouldn't take long for the enemies to kill you. After doing that, load another save that's on the world map. You'll also need either a mountain chocobo, a black chocobo, or a gold chocobo. Ride the chocobo to this little path between Nibelheim and Mount Nebel and find a random encounter. Win the fight and you will immediately be teleported to the exact spot where you died in Mount Nebel. From here, immediately run back out to the world map. At this point, the game is reading the ID of the last encounter you were in as a location ID, so you can manipulate it by finding an encounter ID that matches the ID for the location you want to go. For demonstration purposes, how about we go to the debug room? Head over to Junon area and start looking for random encounters. Run from every encounter you see until you find this specific one, and then run from that one too. Now you just need to win the next fight and you'll be placed in the debug room. Pretty cool, right? But why does this happen? Let's take a closer look. First of all, let's talk a bit about how the game functions under the hood. When you use your computer, you might use one application for writing an essay, another application to listen to music, and another to browse the internet, right? Well, the way Final Fantasy VII works is similar to this, except that it has one application for fields, another for battles, yet another for the world map, and so on. Due to memory limitations of the PS1, only one of these applications, known properly as modules, would be loaded at a time. Since the modules don't have direct access to information from other modules, anytime the game does a module switch, it passes several variables into a temporary location that can be accessed globally, then clears the memory from the module. Then, when the new module is loaded, it passes these variables back from the temporary location into the new module, where it is read and processed appropriately. But the PC, not having the same memory limitations as the PS1, doesn't bother clearing the memory from previous modules, just letting it sit there unused. Additionally, sometimes modules will reuse memory addresses that other modules were using previously, presuming that it will be overwritten appropriately before the next module switch. But since the PC version also doesn't properly clear its memory after a game over, this can have some pretty strained effects in-game. With that out of the way, let's talk about battle modes. You might have noticed that battles function slightly differently at different parts of the game, where sometimes the characters won't play their victory animation, sometimes the victory music doesn't play, and stuff like that. These are all different battle modes, which consist of a series of flags that are turned on and off as needed. These flags are usually set via field scripts and are stored in a global location, which can be accessed by any module. The battle mode we're most interested in is the one used during the Nibelheim flashback. This battle mode skips the reward screen at the end of a battle and just sends you directly back to the last field you were on. That is, it skips loading the menu module and instead just switches you straight to the field module. Now you might recall that the world map is on a different module than the field module, so what happens if you take this battle mode to the world map? Normally this would never happen, because there's no way to get to the world map during the Nibelheim flashback. The path between Nibelheim and Mount Nebel is skipped, and there's no way to get to the other side of the mountain. Even if you made it past the bridge, to the screen where you normally fight Materia Keeper, none of the triggers will work correctly during the flashback. This is due to the game trying to call scripts from the object associated with your first party member, which in this case is Young Cloud. But the Young Cloud object doesn't have the needed script, so nothing happens. However, like I said earlier, there's a glitch in the PC version where memory isn't cleared properly after a game over. This means that if you game over during the Nibelheim flashback, the battle mode stays in memory, allowing you to easily take it to any save that's on the world map. It needs to be a world map save, by the way, because entering a field at this point would reset the battle mode back to default. At any rate, at this point, all you have to do is win a fight. The game will send you to the field module, which sees that the Mount Nebel field is still loaded in memory, and just loads that again. This skips the initialization script, which would normally reset the battle mode, and just places you in the same spot where you died on your other save file. Then when you run out to the world map, the game zeroes out the field data, meaning that the next time you load the field module, it will load in a new field. And this is where the fun begins. There's a variable in the game, let's call it loading ID, that keeps track of the ID of whatever you're loading into, whether it be a battle ID, a field ID, or a world map entrance ID. Each of these things is assigned a number, with battle IDs ranging from 0 to 999, world map entrance IDs ranging from 1 to 64, and field IDs ranging from 65 to 786. Naturally, this means there's quite a bit of overlap between these values, which we can use to our advantage. As I mentioned before, there are some variables that share memory addresses, just due to the different needs of the different modules. And as it happens, when you enter a battle from the world map, the game places the current loading ID into the slot of memory that the field module uses for the field ID. Then it replaces the loading ID with the battle ID for the current battle. This means that if you enter a battle with a battle ID that matches up with a particular field ID, let's say the debug room, and then run from that battle, the next battle will place your desired ID into that memory location. Then if you win that battle, the glitched battle mode will send you to the field module where it reads that incorrect field ID and places you in the debug room without question. Pretty cool, huh? By the way, if you were wondering, trying to use this glitch to warp yourself to a world map entrance ID won't work. If you try to do that, the game will just crash. As you might be able to guess, the game also crashes if you try to load a field that doesn't exist. There's a few more interesting things about this glitch. One thing is that you can actually get the battle mode from the Nibelheim flashback without actually having to be in the flashback. Taking a look at the code, all that's required to activate this battle mode is to enter Mount Nibel with a game moment value less than 385. Game moment is a variable that keeps track of which part in the story you're at, with 385 being given to you for watching this cutscene at the end of the flashback. It's possible to manipulate game moments into being lower than it's supposed to be by tricking the game into playing cutscenes that you've already seen. The easiest way to do that is with this cutscene, which you normally only watch just as you're leaving Midgar for the first time. All you have to do is get back into this field, and the cutscene will play, setting game moment to 335 regardless of what it was previously. The good news is, since you just have to get back into the field, there are multiple ways to do it. You can wrong warp there by hunting down 3 headhunters in the Medial area forest, by using this command in the debug room, or by using a trick known as Yuffie warping. Normally, when you win an encounter against the mystery ninja enemy, the game sends you straight to this field, where you can recruit Yuffie. Similar to the wrong warp glitch, though, you can trick the game into sending you to the wrong field, just by game overing on a previous save file. If you die to a regular enemy, you'll be warped to where you died, like with Mount Nibel. But if you die to a scripted fight, it will teleport you back to that fight. So you can just lose a fight against Motorball, then Yuffie warp back to that fight. Anyway, whichever way you do it, if you leave the Highwind or a gold chocobo next to Midgar, it will still be there after the cutscene, just invisible. So if you take your invisible Highwind or chocobo over to Mount Nibel, you can confuse the game into thinking you're in the Nibelheim flashback, even though you're not. In this state, you can set up the wrong warp glitch just by running into the back of Mount Nibel and running back out. Just make sure that you don't have Tifa or Cid in your party when you enter Mount Nibel for the first time. The game will try to play a cutscene from the flashback, and with Tifa or Cid present, it will softlock. Once you've watched this cutscene and saved, though, you're free to use whichever party you want. Another thing to know is that you can carry the glitched battle mode through as many game overs as you want, as long as you stay on the world map. Using this knowledge, RJ the Destroyer was able to find a way to skip straight from the end of the flashback to the end of the game in the any % speedrun. This is great because you previously had to fight Materia Keeper and go through Rocket Town, so this trick saves a lot of time. A similar method is used in the New Game Plus route, where you use a pre-made save file to set up a wrong warp as soon as you leave Midgar. With this method, you find your desired wrong warp fight, this one in this case, and instead of running from it, you attack yourself and force a game over. Because the game reads the loading ID into the field ID at the start of the next fight, you then just load your speedrun save and win the next fight to be warped to the debug room. There's a quirk with this method though. Whenever you enter a loading trigger on a field, the game takes the player's current coordinates and stores them in another location, which we'll call previous coordinates. Then, if the trigger leads to another field, it will pass a set of coordinates to another memory location, which we'll call temporary coordinates. Finally, when the next field loads, it takes those temporary coordinates and passes them to the player object, placing you in the appropriate location. When you pass from a field to the world map, though, the temporary coordinates are set to 0, because the world map handles player coordinates differently. The coordinates from the field you were just on are still passed to previous coordinates, with the current field coordinates remaining untouched. The problem here is that if you then open the menu and save the game, the previous field coordinates are kept in the save file, since the game wants to remember exactly where you saved if you saved on a field. So when you reopen that save file, the game loads the previous coordinates back into memory, moves them to the temporary coordinates location, then zeroes out the previous coordinates. This is a problem because when you wrong warp into a new field, the game will read the values from the temporary location and use them to place Cloud when the field loads. If these values are all 0, like they are when you exit Mount Nebel, then it just ignores these and places you at a default location somewhere in the map, which, for this debug room, is the center of the room. But since we loaded in our last coordinates by loading a different save file, this means that Cloud gets placed at an incorrect location off the side of the map, where you can't move, thus creating a soft lock. The easiest way to fix this is, when you leave Midgar, save the game and reset. Then reopen your Midgar save, and without entering any fields, just save the game again. Since the game zeroes out the previous coordinates on load, this overwrites the coordinates that were on your save file, meaning that no incorrect ones get loaded in. Neat! As for why this isn't a problem in any percent, the debug room you warp to in that route has a script on field load that places Cloud in the center of the room, making whatever values that were in the temporary location meaningless. Any other field that sets your coordinates on load, like most cutscenes, will also not have this problem. And I think that just about covers it for the wrong warp glitch. I'd like to shout out Halcoon for his great video explaining modules, Mavic and Miesbaker for helping me with some of the technical stuff, RJ the Destroyer for letting me use a clip from his video, Mist6RE and DLPB for making the tools to help us look at FF7's code and variables, and the FF7 community as a whole for being awesome. If you have any more questions, leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. Hope you enjoyed the video and have a good day!